Good morning. It is such a joy to be with you, such an honor to be with you here at Christian Witness Theological Seminary. It has been such a joy this year to travel around to churches and schools across the United States and Canada and see so many different expressions of God's faithful work among his people. And I am so honored to be among you today. I'm also aware that because this is a cross-cultural experience, you're all Chinese and I'm not Chinese. Maybe I will say something that's terrible, um, or maybe I will do something that's rude. Please forgive me in advance. When my husband and I first became missionaries in the Philippines, we attended language school. And at language school, they would tell us also about the culture and how to make sure that we're not offending people accidentally. So one thing they told us is when you go into someone's home, you must remove your shoes. Okay, I got it. So we were there to do Muslim ministry, and I would meet Muslim vendors in the market and then build relationships with them. My strategy was only buy food for one day because then tomorrow I have to go back to the market again. Even if I'm tired, I have to keep going back. So I would go every day and buy one day's worth of food. And so every day I was talking with my Muslim friends. And eventually they invited me to come visit their home. One of them was pregnant, had been pregnant, and I watched her growing and growing. And then her baby was born. And I said, "Can I come see your baby?" And they seemed a little flustered, like, what are we going to do with an American woman in our poor home? And I said, "No, I want to come see your baby." So it was a big event. I rode the jeepney to their neighborhood. They met me at the gate and I came to their home and I started to take off my shoes. And they said, "No, no, 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 don't take off your shoes." I said, "Okay." So I didn't take off my shoes, which was a big mistake. Then I stepped inside their home and they brought me the baby, and the baby was dressed in a beautiful dress. It was a girl. She had a beautiful dress and she was a beautiful baby. And so I said so. "Oh, your baby is so beautiful." Whoops. See, I didn't know. I didn't know. You're not supposed to say this because now the spirits will see the baby and come cause harm, like the evil eye or something. So, oh, what a beautiful baby. So then I kissed the baby also. You're not supposed to kiss. You're supposed to, so that you're not giving any germs, you're just taking them. And then I said, "What's the baby's name?" And they told me, and my English ears could not understand the name. So I said, "Can you write it down for me?" And they searched their entire house. This was a 3-story concrete building with 10 families living inside. They searched from top to bottom and they could not find a pencil anywhere. So now I have shamed them for not being literate. It was a terrible visit. I made all the mistakes, but I think they knew this lady loves us, so it was okay. They remained my friends, and that was the first of many, many visits inside the Muslim compound. And I still count it to be one of the greatest honors of my life that they invited me into their homes and they let me sit on the floor with them and to pray for them and to pray for their children. So so it's an honor as well to be here. Every time we cross into a new culture and people accept us, it's a gift. Today, we're talking about uh, the first 2 books. So this lecture will be about being God's image. This afternoon, I'll speak about bearing God's name. If you want to hear me talk about becoming God's family, you have to find me somewhere else because I'm not talking about it today. But it is the case that when we read the Bible, it's a cross-cultural experience because the Bible was not written in English, it was not written in Chinese, it was written in Hebrew and Greek many, many years ago in a different culture. And sometimes when we come to the Bible, we're expecting it to be a certain way. And so we bring with us our assumptions about how the world should work or how the world does work. And sometimes we're making cultural mistakes without realizing it because we haven't had the experience of living in ancient Israel, of learning their language and seeing how their culture works. So we need to be kind to ourselves today As I share with you about these two concepts in the Bible, I'm going to suggest that we have made some mistakes, that we maybe are misunderstanding what the Bible is saying because we've not taken the time to understand its cultural context. So we need to be gracious with ourselves. It's okay if we've made a mistake. Now we're learning something new. We will take our shoes off this time, right? So we live in a multicultural world, and maybe you've noticed that younger generations, they have a different experience of culture than you do. And there can sometimes be a disconnect. Parents say, this is the way things should be, and children go and do something very different. I'm experiencing this as a parent. I have 3 children. My oldest is 24, my middle child is 20, and my youngest is 17. And the 2 younger children have just moved on campus at Biola University where I teach. So we now have an empty nest. Our house has no children. And my husband and I look at each other. Did we raise them well? Did we do the right thing? Are they ready for life as adults? And most of the time, we're scared that we have not. We have not told them and taught them everything they need to know. We see them making choices that we wouldn't make, and we worry about them. And I think this is an experience common to parents of any culture. At Biola University, I mostly teach undergraduate students. I have one graduate class, and one of my students is here today. So glad she's here. Where did you go? Oh, she's over here. He is here from about an hour away. She came to join us today. But mostly I have undergraduate students. So they're 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, and they are just trying to figure out, what do I do with my life and who am I? The question of identity is such a hot question for young people today. They want to know, who am I and where do I belong in the world? And it's my joy as their professor to help them as they wrestle with this question, and to turn them to the scriptures to say, if we want to know who we are, we have to read this book, because God is the one who's telling us who we are. So today we're going to focus this morning on the question of, what does it mean to be the image of God? There have been many, many books written in English and probably also in Chinese about the image of God. What does it mean that we are God's image? And there have been many different speculations about this. I think some of these books and some of this speculation suffers from making cultural mistakes because it has not immersed itself in the context and culture of ancient Israel. So some of the proposals that I often hear is that, oh, we're the image of God because we are intellectual. If you lined up all the animals and then you have humans, you can see there's a big difference. Humans are smarter than animals. And it's true. We are, on average, smarter than animals, right? And I say on average on purpose because there are exceptions. Human intelligence falls on a long scale, and someone could be born with profound intellectual disabilities. And that raises the question, is this person still the image of God? Or do you have to be smart to be the image of God? We also, people also talk about the image of God as if it's connected to our relationality, our ability to network and have relationships even across long distances. Humans do things that animals don't do. I flew on a plane yesterday to get here, and the man who was flying my plane is someone I've never met. And yet I entrusted my life to him, and he got me here safely, praise God. And I came to speak to a room full of people I had never met before. When Dr. Lowe reached out and asked if I would speak at this symposium or give these lectures, I never met him before. He read my books, but I didn't read his book. I don't know. And still, I agreed to come to a different city on an airplane and to let him pick me up from the airport and drop me off at the hotel. You know, these are things that animals don't do. We have a much wider network of relationships and circles of trust than the animal kingdom has. So it's true that we're different, but I wonder, is that what it means to be the image of God? that we are more relational than animals? Or is it our morality? We have a moral conscience. We know that when we do certain things, that's wrong, and we feel, oh, I've done wrong. And maybe we feel the shame of having dishonored our family or dishonored our community by acting in a particular way. Animals don't do this. They just eat when they're hungry. They don't worry about whether the food is ethically sourced or or who got paid to prepare it and whether they were paid fairly. Animals just eat when they're hungry. They don't seem to have a moral compass. And we're also self-conscious. We not only exist, but we think about the fact that we exist. We have metacognition. We think about thinking and we think about what we're all thinking about. And we try to share where we give shared attention to things. These are all distinctively human traits, but I would argue that they are not what it means to be the image of God. If we want to know what the Bible means when it says that we're the image of God, then we have to read it in its ancient context and not import modern philosophical conversations or discussions into it. We want to listen to God speak to us. So let's look at the biblical text and let's see how it might guide us. If we set aside these assumptions about what it might mean and we look at the text and say, okay, what is it actually saying? Because it's true. We're more intellectual, we're more relational, we have self-consciousness, we're moral beings. These are all true things about humans, but is that what it means to be the image of God? Oops, sorry. So Genesis 1:26 is where we first encounter the phrase image of God in the Bible. Then God said, let us make humankind as our image, as our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created humankind as his own image. As the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. We can make a few observations just from this initial passage. The Bible the Old Testament only speaks 3 times about the image of God. This is the first. And we can see, oh, both male and female are the image of God. So this language applies to everyone. You might be surprised how many people there are in the world today who argue against this. On YouTube, sometimes people say, only men are the image of God. Well, have you read Genesis 1? It says male and female are the image of God. So it's parallel with image of God. It seems clear to me the Bible expects us to understand all human beings, regardless of gender, are the image of God. We also get a sense for what an image is supposed to do. It's very clear that the image is supposed to rule over the fish, the birds, the livestock, the things that crawl on the ground. It's interesting to notice something here. Well, 2 things. First of all, apparently everyone is supposed to rule, because if everyone is the image of God and an image is supposed to rule, then apparently everyone is supposed to rule in some form. That this is something as human beings we're all called into. But the other interesting thing is what it doesn't say. It doesn't say we're to rule over each other. And if we talked about the whole history, all of human history, we would see that there is lots of examples of very strong rulers who lord it over others, exploit their labor, try to aggrandize themselves by extracting value from other people who do their dirty work. But this passage suggests that humans are all supposed to rule, and that our primary rulership is over the animal kingdom, and that both men and women are the image. Therefore, we need to learn to work together somehow to carry out this task. The word image is one that's difficult because right off the bat, we we bring to it our own cultural assumptions. In English, I don't know how this works in Chinese, but in English, an image can be intangible. So it could be a reflection in a mirror. This morning, I woke up in my hotel room and I walked over to the bathroom and there was a mirror and it showed me what I looked like. And I thought, wow, we have work to do this morning. But as soon as I left the bathroom, the image was gone. It's only there while I'm there. It's not tangible. It's fleeting. As soon as I leave, it's gone. That's not what Hebrew means by image. That's not how an image works in Hebrew. We also in English talk about a public image. So perhaps you heard that Dr. Carmen Imes was going to be giving these lectures and you say, I don't know who Dr. Carmen Imes is, never heard of her. You would be like most people in the world who've never heard of me. And so maybe you did what all serious researchers do. You Googled me. Who is Dr. Carmen Imes? And then you would find pictures and podcasts and articles, and you would find within 60 seconds, you would know, she is a nerd. She talks on and on. A student said this once on my course evaluation. At the end of the semester, they wrote, Dr. Imes goes on and on about the Old Testament. Yes, I do. I was actually hired to do that. That's my job. That one puzzled me. Now I tell students at the beginning of the semester, by the way, my job is to go on and on about the Old Testament. The other part of his evaluation was a complaint, and not everything she says is on the test. So now I ask my students at the beginning of the semester, would you like everything I say to be on the test? Oh, no. Okay. Most of what I have to convey to them is difficult to test. I can't make a multiple choice question to capture it. So in English, we talk about a public image. My public image is that I'm someone who's passionate about the Old Testament. That's not what the Bible means when it says we are the image of God. It's not talking about our brand or our public persona. The word image in Hebrew has a very precise meaning. It's something concrete and three-dimensional. It's a statue or idol. Now, sometimes I tell Christians this and they get very uncomfortable. You're saying we're idols? I'm saying that God says we're like idols. So now we have to figure out, what does he mean by this? So the Hebrew word is tselem. Everybody say this, tselem. A tselem in the Hebrew Bible is something concrete and three-dimensional. So in Numbers 33:52, we have an example of this, where God says to destroy all their carved sculptures and cast images, their tselem. So when the Israelites come into the land, their primary task is not to kill people. Their primary task is to dismantle the worship of false gods. And they're supposed to do that by tearing down altars, breaking down sacred stones. People have come in, other cultures have come in to Canaan, and they have set up the means of worship of other gods. And Yahweh says, no, I am the only true God. This is my land. And so you need to wipe out all other claims of sovereignty over this land. And so God gives his people the instruction to destroy the tselem. Interestingly, when God tells his people to build the tabernacle and later the temple where he is to be worshipped, it looks in many ways like other cultures' temples, but with one exception. There's no tselem. There's no idol in the most holy place. In the place where you would expect to have a statue representing a deity, God says, no, he doesn't say this outright, but this is implied. I've already made a tselem. It's all of you. You are supposed to fill the earth, to spread out, to remind people of my presence. Now, how do I know that that's what tselem means? Well, the statue that's on the slide is a statue of King Hadad Yit'i, the king of Guzan. This was an ancient kingdom between what is modern-day Syria and Turkey, right along the border. King Hadad wanted everyone to know that he was boss. So he built a very big statue of himself. It's 3 meters tall. And on the front of the statue, on his skirt, there's little cuneiform writing that describes who he is. We can't see it because the resolution is low, but it has this little wedge-shaped writing across his skirt. What's, I think, very cool about this is that the skirt is bilingual. Just like this lecture today, you're seeing it in Mandarin and you're hearing it in English. This skirt has in both Aramaic and Akkadian a description of who it is and why it's there and how you should treat it. And like any ancient statue, it has warnings against anyone who removes his name. And it tells us, interestingly, that this is the tselem of King Hadad Yithi. Now, Genesis has 2 words to describe image and likeness, tselem and demuth. And this statue uses both words to describe the statue. This is the tselem and demuth of King Hadad Yithi. So it's wonderful. It's like we found an ancient glossary, like an illustrated dictionary of what did they mean when they say this word. So this should help us to know what to expect when we go back to Genesis 1 and we read it in its cultural context. When God says, let us make humankind as our tselem, every ancient Hebrew who heard this news knew exactly what that meant. Oh, I'm the idol? I'm the statue that represents the presence of God? Everyone knows that statue is not King Hadad, right? It just represents him. And if the idol maker has done his job, then it's imbued with the essence of his presence to remind everyone he is the ruler. So that when King Hadad is off visiting some other foreign place, everyone walking by the palace, oh, I am not going to disobey because he's still boss. Even though he's not here, I can't see him. And so when God makes humans as his tselem, his images, he's telling the world, his intention is to demonstrate throughout the earth that he is the creator. He is the one deserving of worship. And when we look at each other, we're reminded, wow, the creator is magnificent. Look what he has made. So there's something special about being the image of God. It exalts us above the animals. We have a special position representing the God of the universe, but also it demotes us. We're not God. We're only the image of God. So at the same time, we are exalted and demoted. And we are supposed to exist in this middle space where we don't receive the glory for ourselves. We give the glory to the one who made us and the one who we represent. This has enormous implications for ministry. It has enormous implications for how we engage with our neighbors, no matter where they're from. We'll talk about some of these implications, but let's finish the passage in Genesis 1. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. There is a story, of course, in Genesis 3 about a creature that moves on the ground, that comes into the garden and begins to cast doubt on the goodness of the Creator. And according to this passage, the job of the first man and the first woman was to subdue creation, to rule over things that move, and to subdue them. The Hebrew word for subdue is the word kabash, which is where we get the English word kabosh. And it's a violent word. It actually means to crush. So when Adam and Eve are in the garden and the snake comes and says, did God really say, I'm going to suggest that there's a path to wisdom outside of God's command. You don't have to listen to him. You can find it on your own. Their job was to crush the snake. So the problem is not that Eve gets too bossy or leads too much. The problem is that she wasn't bossy enough. She and Adam had the shared commissioning to kibosh the snake, and they failed. We're told in Genesis 2 that they were supposed to guard and keep the garden. Why does it need to be guarded? Well, in case anything comes in and tries to steal God's glory for itself. Now, if we fast forward to the New Testament, we find that the New Testament tells us Jesus is the image of God. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Some people assume when they see this, well, of course, Jesus is the image of God. He's God. I would argue that Jesus became the image of God the moment he became human, because every human being is the image of God. So yes, Jesus is God, but you're not automatically the image of God if you're God, right? So I'm Carmen. If I sent a representative, if I say I fell sick right at the last moment and I sent my friend to give my talk for me, or I asked Daniel to do it for me, maybe Dr. Lowe stood up here and tried to give my lecture, he would be my representative, but he would not be me. Then if at the last minute I felt better again, okay, no, I'm still coming. I don't come as my representative, I'm me. So when the Bible says that Jesus is the image of God, it's saying very dramatically that God took on human flesh. He can now mediate and represent the presence of God to the rest of creation physically in the way that humans do. Now, let's review the claims that I've made so far. Every human being is the image of God. There's no exceptions. Genesis doesn't say, well, those who are smart enough are the image of God, or those who are relational enough are the image of God, or those with a very strong moral compass are the image of God. No, it says male and female. God made humans and we are the image. There doesn't seem to be any sort of prerequisite. You reach a certain age and you're the image of God. No, everyone is the image of God. The imago Dei, or the image of God, is not a capacity. It's not something we're able to do. It's who we are. It's our identity. As soon as you attach it to capacity, then you end up with a sliding scale of people who are better at it than other people. And the Bible doesn't say there's anything we can do to disqualify ourselves from being God's image. It just says every human being is God's image. I would argue that the scriptures are clear that our embodiment is key to our vocation. We're not the image of God in some intangible sense. We have bodies. We're three-dimensional, like a tselem, and that's what allows us to represent the presence of God. Now, we're not only bodies. We also have a spirit, and our spirit can commune with God, and that's special and unique, and that's an important part of being the image of God. But our bodies are a key part of what qualifies us as God's image. Our status as God's image entails a responsibility to rule. I speak to many people who don't feel like they're in charge of anything. They don't feel like rulers. But I would say we don't have to wait for someone to tap us on the shoulder and say, you're in charge now. God has already appointed us, because we're humans, to make a difference in the world, to do good work. And when we look around and see what needs to be done, we see problems in our generation. We see streams that are full of trash. We see buildings that are fallen into disrepair. We see those who have no place to live. We see people who are riddled with addiction. We see children who don't have adults to love them. All the problems that we see in our world are ours to collectively address. There's much work to be done, and God has already put us in a position to do something about it. He's called us into that work. Wow, that was cool. That was like preview of the whole thing. This, oh, now you know where we're going. There we go. Okay. Male and female are both God's image. We've already talked about this. And God designed men and women to collaborate. We should be working together to do the job that he's given us to do. Men and women also need to collaborate. And then, as I said, Jesus is God's image because he is human. Now, one question I often get in response to this is, well, but Jesus is special, right? Like, there's something different about Jesus as the image of God than us. And I would say yes. So that means to talk about this, we need to talk about the effects of sin. What is the effect of sin on being God's image? You can look through a library and see what scholars have said about the image of God. And many, many scholars have said that the image was lost at the fall, or it was distorted at the fall, or it was diminished at the fall, or something happened to the image in Genesis chapter 3 that made it so that we're not quite God's image anymore. And I would argue the Bible doesn't say that. And here I'm building on the work of Dr. John Kilner, longtime professor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, who studied this concept and realized that even he had been saying the image of God was diminished at the fall, but the Bible itself does not say that. Certainly, the fall was bad. Something bad happened, but did it impact the image? Well, let's look at what happens in Genesis 3. We find that the effects of sin are they cause broken relationships in every dimension. The relationship with God, relationship with one another, relationship with the animal kingdom and with the ground. You know, Adam he's going to, by the sweat of his brow, he's going to bring forth food. It's not going to be easy to farm anymore. Things aren't going to just come naturally. So even the relationship with the ground is broken. I would argue that what we see in Genesis 3 is a failure to live in alignment with our true identity and vocation as God's image. So every human being is the image of God. This is our identity. But most of us live like this. We're out of alignment. God says, you're my image, but we live as though I have to prove that I'm worthy. So I'm going to work really hard to prove that I'm worthy of God's love. That's living out of alignment with with our God-given identity. Or perhaps the problem is in another area. Perhaps for you, it's, God made me as his image, but I don't know. I'm suspicious of everyone around me, and I just need to feel like I'm at the top of the heap in order to be somebody. So I'm going to just keep trying for a promotion, and I'm going to beat down all the competition. That's living out of alignment with our identity as God's image. So this will help us to think about Jesus and how he's different. In Genesis 3, rather than ruling creation, humans start to dominate each other. There's this culture of exploitation and domination that arises in Genesis 3 that I would say is not it. Our essential identity as God's image is unchanged. We're just not living like it's true. So the consequences are in every area. There's pain in childbirth, pain in farming. Genesis 3:16 says, your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. So instead of collaborating, you're going to try to better each other. And there's going to be enmity with the serpent. All of these are the effects of sin. Now, the New Testament describes, when it talks about Jesus as God's image, it tells us that we all with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, and we're being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And I think it's possible to understand this not as we're growing, we weren't the image and we're becoming the image, but we're learning to live in alignment with our true identity. And what was lost before was the glory, not the image. When you're living out of alignment, there's no glory. There's no real essential reflection of God's purposes in the world. But when you live in alignment, with your true identity. There's a kind of radiance that comes from that, an honor that comes from that, that is like Jesus. So what's different about Jesus? Well, he's not living out of alignment. He's the image of God because he's human, and he lives as though it's true. So he shows us what it looks like to live in alignment with our true identity. And that's why we need to be conformed to Jesus, not so that we can become God's image, but so that we can learn to live like God's image, how God intended us to live. So now I want to think with you about implications. And as I said, this touches everything. And so this is the part where I might start stepping on toes. And I promise I'm not here to offend anyone. But we have to think about, are we living in alignment with this identity and vocation? Or are there areas of our life that we have to revisit and reconsider because we've been not treating other people like they're the image of God? So one thing that we can start with is creation care. In Genesis 1, the first job that God gives the first humans is to care for the garden. And that involves pulling weeds and killing snakes and all the things that you do to make a garden flourish. And I don't see any place in the Bible where God stopped caring about creation, where he said, okay, we're not doing that anymore because it doesn't really matter. Let's just get on and think about souls. Only souls matter. It seems to me that all through the Torah, we can read examples of how even the laws are designed to make Israel conscious of their role as caretakers of the land that belongs to God. It's his land, and we need to steward the resources that he gives us so that others can flourish. So I'm blessed to live within walking distance of Biola University. I walk to work every day, and unless it's pouring rain, which happens once a year. So on my walk to work, I often find garbage on the ground. There's people just litter, or it blows out of trash cans or whatever. My college president did not tell me when I was hired, Carmen, it's your job to clean up trash on campus or on your walk to school. But I've read this book, and this book says it's my job to care for creation. I'm supposed to rule over creation. I'm supposed to make sure that everyone has access to the resources they need. And if I don't clean up the trash, it will go, there's a stream through our campus, it goes right to the ocean. So Nemo is out there, and he will die if I don't pick up the plastic bottles. So I don't do it every day, but pretty regularly. You can find me picking up trash on my walk to work, because not because somebody told me to do it, but because God tells us this is how we should live. This also has significant implications for how we think about children. Children are not future humans. They are human. They are not future images of God. They are the image of God even now. It is remarkable how much we can learn from children, how much they bring to the table because they notice things that we have become accustomed to ignoring. Mommy, why is that man on the side of the road with cardboard sign? What does the sign say? Well, it says he needs food or money so he can feed his family. Well, we have money. We should help him. No, we don't give money to people on the side of the road. Why not? Well, because they might use it to buy something else. Maybe he's lying to us. Well, Mommy, where is he going to sleep tonight? I don't know. It's not my problem. Children have a conscience that has not been deadened by telling itself over and over, this is not my problem, this is not my issue. And so they bring to our awareness ways that we are maybe not living in alignment, where we've started to think, oh, he doesn't matter because he doesn't have a home, doesn't have a car, doesn't have a job. So I don't have to treat him like a human. He hasn't earned my respect. One day I was traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles on Amtrak, and as I waited in the station, a man came over and sat down beside me. He was rolling a big suitcase. I was pulling a suitcase because I had just come from a conference. We had a lovely conversation over the next 45 minutes as I was waiting for my train. And in the course of our conversation, I discovered that he was a US Army veteran. He was working on a master's degree. His hope was to cure cancer. And he was experiencing homelessness. He was fully grounded in his identity as a child of God. He spoke life to me in that conversation. He knew the scriptures and he imparted blessing to me. I could have easily looked at him across the room, this African-American man who's homeless, and I could have easily dismissed him. He doesn't have anything that I need. And God surprised me that day because he ministered to me in the train station. He is the image of God, and he knew it. And so he didn't live as though he needed a certain amount of money to matter. When I set out to write this book on the image of God, I wasn't thinking, I'm going to write a book about abortion. But what I discovered is if you detach the imago Dei from human capacity, and if you see that the Bible just relates it to our human embodiment, then at what point do we start being the image of God? Is it when we can talk? Well, no. Is it when we're born? Or is it when we start having a body? And as I rolled the clock backwards and backwards, I realized, oh, even unborn children are the image of God, because it's not, the image of God is not something you do, it's who you are. It's a God-given identity that you don't have to earn. So this too is a sobering reminder in a world where children are seen as an inconvenience that interrupts our lives, and you know, they can be just eliminated at will. I think this is not such a problem in Chinese culture as it is in white culture. But as we think about older adults, in the wider culture, the older you are, the more disposable you are, that you have nothing left to offer. What we've done is, in the West, is we've attached value to productivity. If you can produce, then you matter. And as soon as you can't produce anymore, then we can be done with you. I think Chinese culture can offer the Western church something in this regard: honor for our elders and honor for the role that they play and for just who they are. But when I speak to younger audiences, when I speak to white audiences, this is such an important corrective to remember that older adults are still the image of God. You can begin losing your memory. You can begin losing your mobility, and you're still the image of God, because the image of God is not something that you qualify for by reaching a certain standard. And that has implications for the question of euthanasia. Do we eliminate older adults who are no longer productive or who are in pain? If we attach value to productivity or to happiness, then it's easy to say, oh, euthanasia is the right answer. But if you believe that every human being is the image of God and every human being matters, then there's never a time that human beings stop mattering. I dedicated this book to our neighbor in Canada. Our neighbor is Colton. He's in the picture here. Colton has intellectual disabilities. He's graduated from high school, but he's reading at about a second grade level. And Colton reminded me every day of the beauty of diverse abilities, because what Colton lacked in reading ability, he more than made up for in his kindness and connectivity with the whole neighborhood. I would drive onto our street. We lived on a cul-de-sac. I would drive onto our street, and he would be there waiting for me every day in the cul-de-sac. And I would roll down my car window, and I would say, "Hi, Colton, how are you? And do you have any symptoms?" He would ask me. No, not today, no symptoms. And he goes, okay, can I see your COVID card? He had given me a COVID card. I lost it, but that didn't seem to matter. And the invisible one worked just fine. So I would pull out my invisible COVID card. I say, oh, it's right here. And he would take his invisible scanner and he would scan my COVID card and he would write on his clipboard that I was okay. And then he'd say, what are you having for dinner? And I'd say, I don't know, Colton. I'm just arriving home. Daniel's in the house cooking. You tell me. You probably know what I'm having for dinner. Yes, you're having spaghetti. And because he was in my house helping my husband with chores before I got home. And then he would say, did you write about me in your book yet? And I would say, not yet. It takes a long time to write a book. But one day I had the joy of telling him as I pulled into the cul-de-sac, Colton, I wrote about you today. And he says, really? So he hasn't read the whole book, but he knows exactly what page he's on, and he shows everyone that he's in the book. And I surprised him by dedicating the whole book to him. And it says, for Colton, the best neighbor who has taught me so much about what it means to be human. Colton does not live life on high speed. He's never going to become the CEO of anything, but he teaches all of us every day how to be human. I've already mentioned our unhoused neighbors. If we actually saw them as the image of God, what would need to change about the way we interacted with them? Even just eye contact and a smile. To treat them, see them as a fellow human being who's fallen on hard times, not someone to be discarded. Everyone is God's image. Everyone. And if we take this seriously, it changes everything. Even people who vote differently than I do are the image of God. People who spend their money differently than I do are the image of God. So what needs to change about the way we share the gospel if all of this is true? I don't know what the typical Chinese way of sharing the gospel sounds like, but I'll tell you what the Western white way of sharing the gospel sounds like. Maybe this will be familiar. You're a sinner. Christ died for you, so you can go to heaven when you die. What's missing? The beginning and end of the story. We've chopped them off. What would it look like to include the message, you are the image of God? But you're living out of alignment with that. You have sinned. And there's good news. Christ died for you so you can go to heaven when you die, but that's not your ultimate destination. The scriptures teach that eventually God will remake creation. He will restore and renew this world, and he will reign here and establish his kingdom. And you will participate in reigning with him over creation if you have accepted him as your savior and surrendered your life to him. This, I think, is a much bigger, better story than the one we've been telling. This is my dad. He lives in Colorado and I'm in Los Angeles, so I don't get to see him as often as I would like, but we talk almost every day. About a year ago, I noticed something was not right. Dad no longer was able to figure out how to get places. His countertop was covered with papers that were in no order. And he was making strange statements about things, oh, I love this picture of you. Dad, that's not me. That's my daughter. And he was getting confused about timelines, and I knew something was wrong. So I began to help him figure out what was wrong. And in last November, he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. It's a deadly disease. It first affects executive functioning, so he can't kind of do step-by-step processes in a way that makes sense. And it is affecting his memory as well, but mostly it's executive functioning. Getting the trash from this bin to that bin can be a very messy process because he can't figure it out anymore. And eventually it will affect his mobility. It kind of like Parkinson's. When I learned this, I was, of course, devastated and worried. I was worried that this was going to be a very difficult journey of caring for him. I'm his only family member. He and my mom are divorced. He and my brother are estranged, so it's just me, and I don't live in the same state. And the Lord has surprised me with the beautiful, beautiful journey of bonding with my dad. We talk every day, almost every day. We check in with each other. He knows I'm here today speaking with you. He's probably praying for us, praying for me. And I'm deeply convinced that my dad is the image of God. He hasn't lost his status as God's image because he's losing his ability to function on his own. What's happening is he's becoming more interdependent. And frankly, he's much nicer to be with than he used to be. My dad was fiercely independent. You couldn't tell him anything he didn't already know, and he didn't need anyone's help. And now he recognizes his need for others, and his relationships are flourishing. And I'm the recipient of that gift in his later years. So my encouragement to all of us is to reimagine how we think about other people and how we think about value. I would love to stay connected with you. And so up here, I'm just putting up the resources. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and X and YouTube and most recently on Substack. So if you would like to keep in touch with me, the QR code takes you to my newsletter on Substack. So you can subscribe if you want to stay connected. I love interacting with people from the different places where I've spoken. It is an honor to be with you, to be in a room with so many images of God who are faithfully representing God in so many different areas of our world. So thank you.